My name is Greg Schwietz. I'm glad to be here. Welcome to this Serra rally. It's my great pleasure to kick off the event and our next couple of days. And, you know, I want to give a couple of nods of credit to people that preceded me. In particular, I want to think the concept of the rally really is a kind of an evolution of what we used to call used to be called the Serra Super Weekend. And the Super Weekend was, somebody figured this out to be the best way to do it. They wanted to meet in Chicago in either December or January. They were checking on the weather, making sure there was plenty of snow. And then they'd hold us up in a hotel, and you'd just be in constant meetings, on and on and on and on, and then you have a good time on the last day and let all the steam blow off. Bob Labatt, his idea, he says, it's got to be bigger than this. And it can be bigger than this. And so he says, I want an inspiring part to this. I want to bring speakers to this. I want to bring in content. So it's not just all work, work, work. It's not Santa's workshop. It's, you know, let's do stuff that helps elevate the organization. So the Serra rally, first rally was in Houston. And my friends from Houston here, Larry Massey and Margot Getty and Candace and others that are here from Houston were important to launch that concept. So those of you might have joined us in Houston for a couple of years. We did the rally, met some great people, inspiring talks, learned a lot about vocations. And then the next step was where to go after that. And since nobody wanted to go back to Chicago for some reason, some obvious reason, so then it was, let's try and do it in Phoenix. And so I met my good friend, soon to be my good friend, Tom Castellanos, Wayne Rich, Dave Mazza. And, you know, part of the deal is when we bring this rally to this local organizations, part of it is to lift up the Serra organization, Chuck and Alice Wold. You know, we want to improve what's going on in our local area. So it's important that we have a Serra contact and a Serra base to work a workshop like this out of. And so we've been blessed with 3 good clubs here in the Valley, in the greater Phoenix metropolitan area, and we appreciate the support that we get from the local Serrans. And it's a mutual thing. It's not just a one-way deal. So they gain from us, we gain from them, and that's the way we keep doing it. A couple other things I wanted to mention to you is some of you received, I think everybody received a decade rosary. And so it'll look like this, and you would have got it during registration. If you haven't gotten one, be sure you pick one up. I want to tell you a little bit about the history behind this decade rosary. First of all, you're the second group to have received this, the first group being the Region 9 conference in Omaha, which happened in October this year, was the first to see this. This is a first creation of this cross. And of this decade rosary, and it was the inspiration of the Serra, of the planning committee in Region 9, to have a particular special gift, if you will, not a knick-knack, but an important gift as a memory of that particular event. And I'm so impressed with it that I said, I want to do the same thing for the Serra rally. So let me tell you a little bit about what this is about, and I'd like to read just a little bit about us. A local Serran in Omaha, Bernadette Esposito, was the person who organized and ran the group that decided on all these things. So I want to talk about the Serra Decade Rosary. And with its beautiful Caravaca cross, that unique cross that has great meaning to Junipero Serra. It was designed and developed by Ghirelli Rosaries, and it's produced in consultation with some of the individual members of the Serra Club of Omaha with the goal of presenting this to the Region 9 conference. St. Junipero Serra Decade Rosary has several distinct features that make it quite unique and very special. The following is a description of the unique features as they appear on the decade rosary. First, the most distinct feature is the Caravaca crucifix, the history of which I'll describe later. This particular crucifix is a patriarchal cross, meaning that it has a double cross beam rather than a single cross beam of the Latin cross. The corpus of Christ is nailed to the upper bar. The lower bar displays round medallions on each end. One bears the Greek monogram IHS for the Holy Name of Jesus, and the other bears a traditional M for Mary. Below the feet of Jesus stands his sorrowful mother. Below Mary is the skull and crossbones that depict the ancient tradition of Adam's burial place, which was the same place as Calvary. The second feature is a small round medallion bearing the logo of Serra International. That's the second item. The third feature is the centerpiece medal, which has an image of Junipero Serra on one side and the image of the mission of San Diego de Alcala on the other side. This mission, San Diego, was the first mission that Junipero Serra founded in Alta California in 1769. The fourth feature is the small miraculous medal at the end here of Our Lady, a gift to St. Catherine of Labouré, which graces the end of the decade rosary. The story behind the Caravaca cross. There's a wonderful history behind the Caravaca crucifix. This crucifix gets its name from the town of Caravaca in Spain. The name of the town is Caravaca de la Cruz, Caravaca of the Cross. In the 700s, Muslims from North Africa invaded the Iberian Peninsula, what we know as Spain and Portugal, and made advances deep into those countries, up into southern France. Their occupation of those European lands lasted almost 800 years and sparked numerous conflicts and wars as Christians strove to reconquer their lost territory and regain their religious prominence. In 1231, a miracle occurred in the Spanish town of Caravaca. The Christian efforts to reconquer the region from the Muslims, including sending missionaries to quietly sustain the persecuted Christians and to evangelize the Muslims. One such missionary was a young priest named Don Ginés Perez. As many were, he was captured and forced to appear before the local Muslim king for interrogation. This particular king was very interested in knowing more about the Catholic faith, especially the celebration of the Mass. He demanded that the young priest give him a demonstration of the rituals of the Mass. Reluctantly, the priest agreed and told the king that what he needed for proper celebration of the liturgy. Everything was brought to him and the altar was prepared. But as he began Mass, he suddenly realized that there was no crucifix for the altar. He insisted that he could not continue without a crucifix. Suddenly the king exclaimed as he pointed to something at the window, "So what is that?" All looked to see what appeared to be two angels coming from heaven bearing a crucifix, which they placed on the altar and then disappeared. The priest was ordered to begin the Mass at the moment of the consecration. Begin the Mass. And then at the moment of consecration, when the bread was changed into the body of Christ, what the Muslim king beheld was a beautiful baby instead of the host. Needless to say, the king was taken aback at the two miracles that he and his family converted to Christianity. The Caravaca crucifix brought by the angels became a revered treasure in Spain. It is said that it contained a relic of the Vera Cruz, the true cross. Copies were soon made, and it was carried throughout Europe and into the New World, particularly by Franciscan missionaries. St. Junipero Serra brought the crucifix with him when he set out from Majorca, Spain in 1750 to begin his missionary journey in Mexico and California. It is believed that it's the first crucifix of this type to be brought to Mexico. It has become a popular and beloved religious symbol. When the burial crypt at the Mission San Carlos Borromeo de Rio Carmelo in California was opened in 1943, the Caravaca cross, crucifix, was found on the chest of the remains of Father Junipero Serra. The cross is now on display at the Carmel Mission. When St. Junipero Serra was canonized, or when he was canonized by Pope Francis on September 23rd, the Caravaca crucifix that he had carried with him throughout the missionary travels, and which was buried with him for 169 years, was brought to the ceremony in Washington, D.C. So now you know the rest of the story, as they say. Caravaca cross. So think of that. When you see that, think of St. Junipero Serra. And think about those Franciscan missionaries going to those uncharted lands. And think about that one guy that went to Spain in 700s or 1231. And the purpose, again, is to support the faith in adverse conditions. I've got the best blesser in town here. The answer is no, they're not blessed yet. So if you want to do a mass blessing later or anytime you want to do that, bring them to lunch and we'll bless them then. Okay, thanks. Okay, next. This is the important part. This is an important part of this weekend. Let me tell you a little bit about our next speaker and the next topic. In 1985, Greg Schwietz, his wife Mary Lynn, and others from Omaha went to a conference on tech, Teens Encounter Christ. And in that conference, there was a speaker from Green Bay, Wisconsin, friend of Cindy Bell, we found out later. Whoever Cindy Bell was. We didn't know who Cindy Bell was, but we found out later. And his name was Father Mike Carroll. And he gave a talk on servant leadership. And the idea behind servant leadership that he presented at that time was talking about the importance of institutions and organizations to change the world, to make it better. That we collectively as human beings have dramatic effect on our culture and our people when we work through institutions. And how we do that makes a big difference. Servant leadership is a concept that is very biblical, where there isn't your traditional pyramidic structure, power structure. A very common phrase within servant leadership is first among equals. That the people gather together. And a principle is that no one of us has got the whole deal. We all need each other to complete the picture. This is so much the mystical body of Christ. Everybody brings their own unique God-given talents. And in each of our clubs, we have that happening. Many people come together to create what is the local Serra Club, bringing all our gifts, of course, all of our problems, but most importantly, we bring together something that comes together that's bigger than the sum of its parts. Bigger than the sum of its parts. He said, Mike Carroll, at that time, he said, you know, institutions have a great opportunity or great potential for good in this world, in this society. And he was quoting a man named Robert Greenleaf. Robert Greenleaf wrote an essay called The Servant as Leader. And so Robert Greenleaf's history was that he worked at AT&T back in the days when big organizations had people that just worked on big ideas. They might not have worked on the line. They might not have worked on dial-up. but they were working on bigger concepts, and part of it was leadership development. And so what he discovered in his leadership development is that he found that in studying some of the CEOs of the past years at AT&T, that some of the leaders, not just the CEOs, but the leaders of that organization seemed to come through one little channel. What was that channel? That channel was this, they seemed to be all work for some period of time underneath a particular middle manager, unnamed, some person. They seem to have this unique, this person that doesn't stand out, but makes an impact on the organization. So as he's studying, Robert Greenleaf, he says, then he studies further, and he says, organizations have great potential, great potential. And one of the most significant organizations in the world to make a difference in the world is the Catholic Church. This is Robert Greenleaf speaking, a Quaker. He says, but the problem with the Catholic Church is that it's no more for what it's against than what it's for. And so with that idea and that big concept that I remember, those are my memories of that particular concept, I pursued it because there's a movement, if you will, of integrating servant leadership into organizations and into corporations too. So there were an organization, Robert Greenleaf Association, that we went to, some conferences. We learned a little bit more about it. So servant leadership was kind of a hot button for a while for me. Then it kind of faded away. But I always kept it in the back of my mind to see, how can I utilize this? So next, I read another essay by Robert Greenleaf called Trustees as Servants. So I was thinking about trustees, and I think about our own boards. I think about our own governing organizations, and part of the problem that we have with our organizations is that we don't fully engage in the process. And so my example of this and my experience of it is that when we're on boards, sometimes it's almost like we came in 10 minutes late. Like, what's going on? I don't understand this. But we don't have enough ingenuity or enough guts to raise our hands and say, would you explain that for me, please? So when the vote comes around, everybody's looking around, well, are you voting for this or not? I guess they're all voting for that, so I guess I'll vote for it. And so, you know, part of the deal is that when we're on boards, especially Serra International and USA Council boards, we come together infrequently. We get to know each other over a period of time, and there's a certain level of, if you will, trust, of course. And we can't know everything, but sometimes we don't ask enough questions to really get a good informed answer. And I think that sometimes we work in a little silo capacity where we don't think it matters that we ask the right questions. And so when I read this article about trusteeship and the importance of trustees in organizations, it's like, you know, who runs the organization? We have a Serra International organization that's a wonderful, beautiful, wonderful place to be part of it, and everybody's here because they love it. And some of it have loved it a long time. And we know it for all its goodness and all of its weaknesses. And so when I think about what happened with our times of troubles and what was going on there, what was missing in that element, I'm thinking what we were missing in our element was that at our board levels, we were missing the connection to our responsibility to own the whole process, each one of us. And so when we own the whole process, that means when we're sitting in a board meeting and there's conversations going on about a particular item, and maybe it's a consent agenda that we didn't read about in advance, or maybe it's about an item that we don't know enough about to ask a question about, many times we're mute and we don't ask that question because we figure somebody else will take care of it. And you know what? Nobody else is going to take care of it. You have to take care of it. So when I think about trusteeship, and this is why I want to talk about this concept of servant leadership, Servant leadership is not about power. It's not about structure. It's kind of the antithesis of that. It's not that we're not structured. It's not that we don't have connections, and it's absolutely about responsibility to each other. But trustees, to quote Robert Greenleaf, hold all the ultimate authority of the organization. However, they don't use it operationally, but they are responsible for it. So we hire people to do things for us, or we employ people, or we encourage people to take this task on or whatever, but we don't discard it. This year, I talked a little bit about, and last year at this podium, I talked about setting up leadership councils. Leadership development teams within our Serra clubs. And so what's missing in Serra is leadership. So how do you own the process? Somebody has to step up, and trustees do that. Who's a trustee? In many of our clubs, the trustees are the wisdom group. They're the group that have the big experiences, the long experiences, the ones that remember the good and the bad times. And they help new clubs renew themselves by placing new members in responsible positions and moving old members into new positions that they can employ, that they can benefit the club. They have to mix it up. So we sell ourselves short. That's the problem. We don't think enough about ourselves and our organization to really spend the time that it takes to really make this a good organization often enough. We do it once in a while, and it's great, and we benefit so much from it. But the point about servant leadership is that you have got a calling to this Serra Club. It's a special opportunity to make a difference in the church, and we have been called to one of the greatest missions in the church, and that's to support our priests and religious people. And we've been given the job by the Holy Father, Pope Pius XII, and every pope since, about what that big job and how important it is, to the point where this June 23rd, we heard it once again, you have a very important job. And we need you, Serrans. That's the Holy Father speaking to you. So, do we need you part-time? Do we need you kind of like, okay, whatever? Or do we need you all? And the energies that you have to give to Serra are going to be very important, but you have to own it. You got to own it. So back to our trouble issues. And when you're sitting on boards, when you're thinking about something else while they're doing business, don't let those moments pass when you can make a difference by asking the right question, focusing the question, and helping your clubs. And therefore, by helping your clubs, you help this whole organization be relevant, make an impact in religious vocations in the church. So I'm encouraged by this event this weekend, the number of people that signed up, said yes to this, the number of people that said yes to the invitation from fellow Serrans to join us and to be part of this. I'm encouraged that I've got people like Tom Thibodeau and other people outside the church, Father Ralph O'Donnell, that see Serra for the impact that it's got. And you know what? Listen to them, because you've got a great gift here. And it takes all that you got, and it wants all you got, that you can give to it to make it better and make it stronger.